Blessings, everyone. Thanks for joining me. And I'm really happy today to be rejoined by my old friend John Lamont. I interviewed John a number of years ago about the late Cardinal Pell. I think he was still alive when we spoke. But thank you, John, for joining me. Could you tell
Oh,
everybody
you're welcome.
oh, thank you, a little bit about yourself if they didn't see the other episode?
Okay, well, I guess I'm excuse me, excuse me, there's a flu going around.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm I'm a Catholic philosopher and theologian now, sort of kind of retired due to foolishly getting a COVID shot and being very sick.
Oh,
Um,
oh, I'm sorry. Wow.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so I had previous experience at Cardinal Pell when I was still working. So I did licentiate in theology with the Dominicans in Ottawa. Then I did a doctorate in theology at Oxford University. Um, then I sort of, after a couple of years, I went out to work in Australia at the Cardinal Pell's seminary. So I was teaching his seminarians. I sort of would have known him slightly. I would have known him to say hello. He would have recognized me. We had a few conversations. Um, and working on the inside of the church, you got a sort of a good idea of sort of what he was like as a man and as a bishop. Um, so I have some personal knowledge of the man of the Australian church. So that's what I guess perhaps makes it worthwhile you're talking to me.
Thank you. I want to share my screen with you. I wanted to cover this first because people are going to accuse me of sour grapes in terms of Matt Fradd. So I thought I would get this out of the way. We kind of had a run-in on social media not that long ago. I mean, I don't know him. We've never met. I had some interactions with him many, many years ago, over 10 years ago. And I don't know how to word it. Um I came away from the interactions I had with him online sort of uh uncomfortable. I don't have any ill will against Matt Fradd, so I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way.
Okay, I
Yeah.
don't know a lot about him myself. I'm not a follower of him. I tried to find out a bit about him before this talk. Um, I guess he's an online Catholic guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a very large following, Catholic influencer. He's had big names on his podcast, but the reason we're talking about him, or I wanted to talk about you, John, was that he's done a couple of podcasts where he's mentioned Cardinal Pell. Fradd is Australian, and he did one Saint Pell, so that tells you what his
Yes. At least there's
what
a question mark, but yeah. But
but we'll look at the so here's like I said, he's had big names on his podcast. Jordan Peterson. I put the arrow there because there's Cardinal Pell. And actually I noticed that when Pell was still alive and I wasn't aware of Matt really saying anything about him. And I thought, gee, he's got his picture there. Well, there's another one. And then, of course, Pell died in 2023, correct? Yeah. No state funeral in Victoria due to victim distress. So, although there is sort of a shadow of suspicion and I think certainly trauma among the victims in Australia, I think there's been an effort, certainly within the Catholic Church, to reform his reputation, I guess you could say. This was probably the one of the most disturbing that I ever saw because it's well, when I was Catholic, this was my home diocese. I'm not Catholic anymore. But St. Patrick's Seminary is the archdiocesan seminary for San Francisco and for a lot of other dioceses in the West. And so Cardinal Pell, uh, I think this was after he was released from prison, came out and did sort of a tour of the West Coast because Ignatius Press is located here. And they were publishing his memoir, his sort of prison memoirs. And
Yes.
he showed up at the seminary and gave a talk, and they were using this. They could still be using it today. It's sort of on the front page of their Facebook.
Well, is that Cordileone next to him?
So yeah, here's Pell,
Yeah.
and here's Archbishop Cordileone, and
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that. I
I
mean, they're sort of birds of a feather, those two.
I assume these are seminarians and some of
Yeah.
the professors there, but for me, it was disturbing because I was like, this is a man with, at best, has a checkered, questionable history, especially in terms of the pre-sex abuse issue. And here they're holding him up as a model for future Catholic priests. And I was like, this does not bode well for the
No.
Catholic Church. And here are the prison journals that were published by Ignatius Press.
They're yes, I've seen those. I haven't bought them.
I
Uh,
haven't either.
I have. They're widely publicized. They're in Catholic bookstores everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Honoring George Cardinal Pell, Catholic religious and leaders from the United States sent a message to George Pell. I don't know who this is. This is, of course, Bishop Barron. I can't remember his name, but he's the founder of Focus. And of course, Archbishop Corleone, who I know well. And here again, courage.
Well, he did have courage, right? Uh, it's just whether he was had integrity as well.
Okay.
Here's Father Ridsdale.
Yeah, here's Father Ridsdale. So we could get to that maybe after we talked, if we after we watch the video. So Ridsdale was a serial pedophile who molested boys, I think from age 6 to 16. I think the count right now is at 69.
Yeah,
And
that's all right.
when he was originally accused and had to make an appearance in court, I think he was Archbishop at the time. Pell accompanied him, which was pretty bizarre. Australia's worst pedophile priest could have abused 1,000. This is from 2017. Cardinal George Pell knew of abuse by pedophile priests, Australian inquiry concluded. Cardinal Pell's evidence that pedophilia was not mentioned and that the true reason was not given is not accepted, the report said. That, I mean, I've read this article. People can go back and look at it. It because I've dealt with um, Catholic prelates, he essentially says that there were rumors, reports, conversations about this particular priest, Ridsdale, other pedophile priests, but that he personally was not aware of it. Now, I've sat down with Catholic bishops and told them about A, B, and C. They can literally be asked the next day from someone, what do you know about A, B, and C? And they'll say they know nothing. It's just kind of what they do.
Yeah,
So,
I wanted to talk about this particular question later on, if that's all right. But yeah,
oh,
but if
oh,
you want to go on.
okay. And this was just a recent article, The True Legacy of the Rapist, George Pell. So there's been I don't know if you're aware of the latest news, but there's been a settlement case in Australia. The way I understood it, reading the articles, is that the suit was a civil suit, so there's the as opposed to criminal, the how would you say, the burden of proof is
Was
not
lower.
is lower. It's not like
Yeah.
beyond a reasonable doubt. It's kind of like when the two Nicole Brown Simpson, I can't remember the young man's name, that was killed by O.J. Simpson, and the families sued him for wrongful death, and they won. So it's a different burden of proof, and they won against Cardinal Pell that he did indeed molest these boys. And then this is just a look at what's going on Australia. In Australia, Catholic Church's bank is full, but pews are empty
If
for
I could just mention that picture is St. Patrick's. That's the old seminary for
wow,
Australia, the old National
wow,
Seminary.
wow,
It's now a hotel training school.
wow.
It has been for a couple of decades. So the reason given for moving away from it was was that it was too expensive and there weren't enough seminaries to justify, which may have been true, but also it was an appalling hotbed of sexual abuse and sort of general homosexuality, and that really was uh, why it was shut down.
Okay.
I had an interesting experience just talking to people after mass once, right? Saying, "Oh, I heard that at Manly, that seminary, there's a lot of sexual abuse going on. Do you know anything about that?" And some guy said, "Oh yeah, it's like Father O'Hearn. He was having it away with the 15-year-old son of one of the staff, right?" And at this time, this Father O'Hearn was still a parish priest in good standing. He's later been convicted. So that's how hard it was to find out. You asked people after about what it was like. You asked people after in coffee time after mass, which actually is a very good time to find out about this stuff. Um, yeah, so that illustrates how corrupt the place was.
Okay, so this is these are the two videos that I wanted to look at by Matt Fradd. This one was from April 11th, 2024. Matt Fradd's got 657,000 subscribers, because so that's a lot.
And then thinks, how do
Speaking of
I?
Australians, I was going to tell you a joke that the Australian government's been giving out those pictures of Cardinal Pell that you have, Pell grants.
What does that mean? What's a
Oh,
Pell
Pell
grant?
grant. Oh, you don't have the American context. Pell grants are student loan grants.
Okay.
So it's like a loan, but you don't have to pay back.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, Cardinal Pell, pray for us. Oh, I
Amen.
love that man.
but yeah, he's a good example of not a stereotypical Australian. I mean, not that he's not laid back, but
Yeah.
he just is.
He's more kind of refined, I think, than most.
stereotype,
I'm reading his
right.
prison journals and I'm going back to them, and they're just remarkable. He's such a childlike man, very simple, and he's writing these journals in prison. He's aware. You can tell that he's aware that these will possibly be published,
Yeah.
and yet he's not trying to demonize the prison system or the guards.
Yeah.
He's not trying to pretend that his experience is much worse than it is. He's talking about watching football tonight, I was just reading his entry on Good Friday. I didn't watch TV today, except for the news, but I didn't watch the AFL game. Like the fact that he added except for the news. Like he could have just said, I didn't watch TV today because it's Good Friday, but
Right.
he's just so transparent and human, and I cannot imagine what it would be like to have the whole country thinking that you've done something despicable that you didn't do.
It really
And to
is
have
a
goodwill.
sort of white martyrdom. I mean, because
Well, they've thrown around a lot of things. I think he should be a saint, white martyrdom, all this stuff. It's very strange. I wasn't aware of this Joe Hirschmeyer. He
I
works,
don't know about it.
he worked, I don't know either. He works for Catholic Answers, which is a very pro-Catholic, pro-Vatican news source. this Joe Hirschmeyer Pope-splained all
Yeah.
around Francis's approval of same-sex marriage. So these people are hardcore papists. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry,
Well,
but
propagandists.
they will defend the church no matter what. So I'm not surprised that they're
Yes. Well,
defending
can we say the hierarchy or the Pope?
the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it turns my stomach a bit. There's no discussion about anything. They mainly reference the particular case where Pell was accused of molesting two boys in a sacristy. And that was the case that he was originally convicted on, sent to prison, and then that conviction was overturned. And that's what they're focusing in on, while they're completely neglecting his history as an archbishop and cardinal and how he handled or mishandled the abuse crisis. So it's selective.
And I mean, you can see how thin it is. Quoting Pell, "Oh, I didn't watch TV today except for the news. This is supposed to be some deep spiritual reflection on Good Friday."
Let's continue.
To have been martyred would have been in many ways an easier cross to bear than to have your name utterly besmirched.
Imagine right now you're in prison. You're in Salt.
Imagine being one of the boys beginning from age 6 who were molested by a pedophile priest. Imagine that sort of suffering.
Solitary confinement, and CNN hates you. That's kind of the equivalent of the ABC in Australia.
Yeah.
And they're doing all these hit pieces, and they've hated you for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Because you've spoken out against contraception and sodomy, and you've been an Orthodox. They
Okay. He's done this before. The reason that and I've done so many deep dives into this man's life. Fradd is saying that the reason that Cardinal Pell was so disliked, and he's laying it totally at the foot of the media, was because he stood up for these Christian values, these Catholic moral standards. That's not actually true. There was so much outrage, especially amongst the public in Australia, because the abuse scandal had been so egregious there. I mean, people have no idea. Australia is not geographically a small country, but population-wise, it's a lot smaller than the United States. And the Catholic community was much smaller. And they got hit hard by the abuse crisis. And that's why there was so much hatred towards him.
Well, I think you can say that was one factor in, like, Pell was a JP2 bishop, right? So partly in order to get promotion under John Paul II, which he did, but I think partly out of conviction. So he would repeat sort of John Paul II's characteristic lines, and this did make him unpopular, right? But to say that that's the reason why everyone hated him is clearly false.
Sure.
Yeah.
hate you, and they are so excited to have this. And you're in prison and you can't defend yourself, and you're just hearing things, and you're hearing that some people are defending you, but you've got to think, well, even the people who want to defend me, they must have some doubt.
Right.
You know, like all of us can do horrendous things, so maybe it's possible.
Not all of us can rape children or cover it up.
No.
Fradd.
Yeah, just to have that. I mean, I've been in situations where I've known people where there was some kind of accusation of immorality, and they've said, oh, no.
Immorality? I hate to keep stopping, but it's so crazy. They're trying to equivocate things. This isn't immorality. This isn't just immorality. I mean, it's criminality.
This didn't happen. But there's still that part of you that says, well, you say it didn't happen,
Right.
but a lot of seemingly good people have said things didn't happen. So to have someone actually innocent.
Yeah. And then, of course, all 7 judges at the Australian High Court overturn and say, yeah, we have no good evidence to think he did
the
this.
accusations were outrageous. I mean,
Yeah, they were.
I I was in that situation of wanting not to say Pell is innocent when the allegations first came out, because I held him in very high esteem, but I also knew plenty of people I've held in high esteem have had moral failings and even profound, shocking, evil ones.
Yep.
So it's certainly possible. But then you read the details and you say, this doesn't seem physically possible. This doesn't, you know, this happened on a beach and no one noticed or reported.
Well, I was in Melbourne.
What is he talking about? It happened on a beach.
That I don't know. This is he was Pell was convicted for something that was supposed to have happened in a sacristy.
Exactly. Yeah. And people should know that there were two alleged victims. One of them died of a heroin overdose before any of this ever came to light. So.
Several years back, giving a talk downtown, and they took me to the cathedral. They showed me the not the presbytery, the sacristy, where it was said to have occurred, and when and it was just, it's so insane.
Yeah.
So I'm glad he was vindicated, and I would like to see him canonized. I'm not canonizing him, but I do ask for his prayers.
Amen. Kind of a Pell bearer.
Strongest, yeah, very good, very good.
I had to use one you'd get.
Strong Aussie. He's also a big fan of Aussie rules football, and it's so beautiful to read his diaries and to have him talk about footy teams that I grew up watching.
Oh, how lovely. Why is it impossible? Oh, I don't know. There's a number of cases around the world where altar boys were molested in sacristies, so I don't know why they find that so hard to believe. Do you know many particulars of that case?
I do. I followed it at the time. I don't think the evidence in that case was convincing, and it's possible that he probably was set up or framed. But you can't be canonized. Just not having raped two boys in a sacristy isn't sufficient cause for canonization. And B, he did many worse things than that.
Yeah, let's talk.
I mean, he protected many criminal pedophiles.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Hold on. So I'm trying to do a segue here. Share. So this is a recent one that Matt Fradd did, January 1st, 2025. And he talks about Pell again.
I give you full permission to say you don't, if you don't. I love Cardinal Pell. He was an absolute lion of a man.
I don't know who that is.
Well, Australian.
Absolute lion of a man. I find this interesting because in the Archdiocese here, Corleone is often referred to as the Lionheart. So I find that an interesting comparison.
Well, that's
Cardinal,
presumably his
who
Italian name, right?
was faithful to his church, and the mainstream media hated him because he was opposed to contraception and abortion and things like this. And
He said it again. He said, this is why the media hated him, because he upheld these Orthodox Christian positions, not because he covered up child sex abuse. It's rewriting history. It's gaslighting 101.
they absolutely villainized him and then accused him falsely of doing things for which he went to prison.
Whoa.
And then the Australian High Court eventually vindicated him fully.
Weird.
And this is after he's been in prison, solitary confinement. He was absolutely mistreated, but and wrote these beautiful prison journals, and they're available for purchase. And I just love him. And
He's passed though?
yeah. So I asked for his intercession, and yeah, that's what that is.
Oh. I didn't know about him.
These I got to say something too really quick about some of these Catholic influencers. They do bear, I think, some responsibility for being they should be truthful, and I don't see it here. Go ahead, John.
Well, would it be a good approach if I tried to sort of set out why Pell wasn't a saint?
Go ahead.
Okay, so maybe a bit of introduction for your viewers who don't know that much about the Australian Church, or maybe Australia. So the country was originally founded as a jail, right, because of the American Revolution. British prisoners used to be sent often as indentured laborers to the American colonies, but after the United States was established, they couldn't do that. So what do you do with the prisoners filling up the prisons? There's a lot of them because the laws are very savage at the time. You could be hanged for stealing a silver spoon. Right? So Captain Cook had just gone exploring and found Australia, and it was suggested, well, why don't we send the prisoners out to Australia? Because they can never get back from there. And so the first fleet that founded Australia was a fleet of ships containing convicts and guards. Right? So it was founded as a jail, and it continued on as a jail for decades. It only sort of really became largely a free society when the gold rush happened in 1850, and then lots of people came out for the gold, and it wasn't a deterrent to be sent to Australia any longer. Now, of course, a lot of the prisoners there were Catholics, right? Irish Catholics, partly because some of them were actual criminals out of poverty or criminality. Many of them were sort of political prisoners. So that's the foundation of the Catholic Church in Australia. Right? It kept on at about sort of 25% of the population, largely Irish, very sort of clannish, tribal Irish church, and that's what Pell grew up in. So you had this, and it's a community that suffered quite severe discrimination well into the 1950s, because sort of the Protestants in the majority really ran things. They were often quite violently anti-Catholic, or else were Freemasons who didn't want Catholics to take their jobs. And you would find sort of no Irish need apply mentions in job ads until the early 1950s. Right? So Pell grew up. He was a son of a bar owner, right? So quite a rough guy. He used to work in the bar, check out the drugs, and so on and so forth. Smart boy, good athlete. Went to, I guess, devout Irish Catholic mother. Went to the seminary. Was spotted as a talented guy, right? Partly out of reasonably good intelligence. He did go to Oxford. I think he got help writing his doctorate there, but and also partly because he was a strong, tough, wily personality. He's really sort of like an Irish crime boss or something like that. Right? So he was genuinely tough and wily, and had leadership qualities. He was ordained in the Diocese of Ballarat, which is a small sort of a city, smallish city in the Australian state of Victoria. Quite a strong Catholic state. And one of the places that had the worst child sex abuse records in Australia, or indeed anywhere in the world. Right? It was really more of a both the diocese and the local Christian Brothers school. It was really more of a criminal organization disguised as a religious one, right? Than actually primarily a religious one. Yep. Okay, so Pell is coming up. He's identified as a promising guy, meant for higher things. He's already been sent to Oxford to study there. Right, he comes back, given big responsibilities. He's in this diocese of Ballarat. So, what does he do in reaction to what does he do in this very corrupt environment? Right? The Australia did a Royal Commission of Inquiry into child sex abuse at institutions. It wasn't limited to the Catholic Church. It looked at other churches and other institutions, but it went into some detail about the Catholic Church. And you can find all it was very thoroughly and professionally done. You can find all the documents online. Originally, they were redacted because of Pell's forthcoming trial, but after he got out, they just released the unredacted documents.
Can I interrupt you 1 second?
Yep.
I just want to share. I've got a let's see if I can pull it up. So this is what I think you were talking about, John, with that Royal Commission, how they investigated different religions. So new study from Australia, about 20% of Australians are Catholic, but 71% of those abused in a religious setting were abused in the Catholic Church, and 21.8 were in other Christian denominations. Let me stop the share.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, it is in a religious setting rather than total abuse, but
yeah.
it does make clear that the Catholic Church is much worse.
Yeah. And I think, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So, Pell in the Diocese of Ballarat, right? I guess maybe that's the first thing to look at to show why he wasn't a saint, because he had a history there of explored by the Royal Commission of participating in the diocese's policy of covering pedophilia.
Yeah. Let me pull up too. Let me hold on, John. Let me I think this will help illustrate what you're talking about. So this is an article that I wrote called Cardinal Pell, a Catholic Hero. So this is the picture we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
In 1993, then Auxiliary Bishop George Pell accompanied predator priest Gerald Ridsdale to his court appearance, where Ridsdale was charged with 130 incidents of assault involving 9 boys aged 12 to 16. Ridsdale pleaded guilty. Now, this was one of the priests in Ballarat, correct?
Ballarat, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but if I could just maybe get back to I see the mention there of the first evidence of Pell covering things up. So they were diocesan priests that were sexual abusers. There's also a local Christian Brothers school that was essentially run by sexual abusers, right? So we have in 1974, a Mr. Green comes in and runs into Pell at the swimming pool in Ballarat. Father Pell came into the change room and said something like, "Good day, boys." Then I just said something like, "We've got to do something about what's going on at St. Pat's." Father Pell said, "Yes, what do you mean?" I said, "Brother Dolan is touching little boys."
Yes.
Father Pell said, "Don't be ridiculous," and walked out. Right. So Dolan was so Dolan was indeed touching little boys. He was a pedophile. He was one of the nests of pedophiles, or the pedophiles at that school. So first evidence, 1974. Someone comes to Pell, says, "Oh, this guy's committing these sins." He says, "Don't be ridiculous," walks out, and never follows it up, right? And he, as he'd say, he quotes.
When asked why, Pell told the commission it was because the boy wasn't asking me to do anything about it.
Yeah. And yes, lately he pleads guilty to 33 counts of indecently assaulting boys.
Yeah. Okay. Dolan would plead.
So that's oh
God,
so that's
help us.
That's quite an early, and the Royal Commission went into that case, and it was concluded that is indeed what happened. Right. So you might say it was a lapse, but you go on to look at the case of Father Ridsdale. Right. So he was, I mean, he would have probably abused hundreds of boys. Right.
Here we go. I've got it right here. In the 93 court appearance where Pell was, Ridsdale was charged with 30 incidents of indecent assault involving 9 boys aged 12 to 16. That same year, David Ridsdale, the nephew, informed Pell that his uncle had molested him. Years later, when interviewed about his recollection of these events, Pell's memory, in my opinion, at best, was somewhat evasive.
Okay, the Royal Commission wasn't convinced by Ridsdale's evidence, although it may Ridsdale may well have been completely telling the truth about what Pell said. But I prefer to focus on the things that are sort of that aren't open to debate.
Okay.
Right? So Pell advances in the Diocese of Ballarat. He's made a consultor to the bishop.
Okay.
Right. And so that's the consultors are people who the bishop meets with and consults about important issues in the diocese. And Ridsdale was continually being moved from one parish to another, one spot to another, because he was molesting boys and people complained, right? So Pell, so there's more than one meeting of these consultors in which the question of Ridsdale being moved came up, right? So you have one 1977, when Ridsdale was being appointed as parish priest as a parish priest, right?
Mm-hmm.
He moved on by the bishop after molesting people over. He'd already been molesting people for at least a decade, right? So Pell claimed, "Oh no, there's no mention of why he's been moved on at this meeting." Right? There's another meeting, and it's pointed out by the Royal Commission that the other priests who were consultors, knew about Ridsdale's crimes.
Correct.
Right? So the Royal Commission says "Oh, did anyone mention the fact that Ridsdale was being moved because of sexual abuse?" And he says, "Oh no, I can't remember what they said, but I remember that that wasn't mentioned." Right. So this inconsistency was pointed out. Well, you can't remember what was said, but you remember that wasn't mentioned. And he says, "Okay, none of the other consultors mentioned this fact." And Pell said, "Oh well, like this Father Monsignor Fiscalini, the Bishop Mulcairns. Oh, they just lied. They didn't mention anything in this meeting." Okay. So then there's a further meeting, 1979. Ridsdale's being moved again because he's molested huge amounts of more boys, and there's more complaints. Okay, so again, it's a question of we'll send him on study leave. Okay, and
can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you real quick? It's important to say that this MO that they were employing in Australia wasn't unusual, because I mean, if you watch the Spotlight movie, I mean, they were doing the same thing in Boston, like with Gagan. So this was kind of the way the Catholic Church operated. I would say they still operate this way, but
I think so. So Pell says, "Oh yeah, well the other people there did know about and Ridsdale's pedophilia, and that the secret is out in at least 2 parishes." But he said he never heard anything in relation to this behavior of Ridsdale. So a second meeting where Ridsdale is being moved, Pell says, "Oh, no one said it had anything to do with pedophilia, and I never asked about it." Okay. Third meeting.
Sorry, John. Did you mention too that Ballarat is sort of a working class town? I think that's important. It reminds me a bit of the boys who were abused in Boston, who came from kind of working class, sometimes, especially with the Paul Shanley case. Some of these boys came from kind of hardscrabble. And from what I've read about Ballarat, it was a working class town.
I don't think it was so much more than anywhere. I mean, Australia was supposed to be like the working class paradise in those days, but
okay,
the Catholics were certainly working class.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
these
Yeah,
weren't, but these weren't boys that came from like upper middle class families. These were
no,
boys,
no, no.
yeah. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that they're more easily intimidated, and sometimes from that kind of families they're more devout, and
Yeah,
it's more difficult to come forward.
and
And
say, yeah, the father did this to me, right? Yeah, so we have two meetings of which Risdale's moved but is moved because he's been abusing boys, right? Pell says that was never mentioned. I knew nothing about it. A third meeting, 1980. Um, uh, Ridsdale's moved again um, to another parish to be the parish priest. Pell says,
oh,
"Oh no, nothing was mentioned. Oh, the other priests knew about the other consultors knew he's a pedophile. Yes, but I didn't know. No one mentioned it. Right?
is that what he said? Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Uh,
how can he feign ignorance at that point? How can he do it?
well, he's just. It wasn't very. You can look at the. You can look at the transcript, right? Well, what is he going to do? Say yes, I knew and I knew all about it and I went
Yeah.
along with it, right?
Yeah. Can I tell you something, John?
Yeah,
Because I kind of consider I've never been a priest. I've never been a seminarian, but I worked very closely with the Catholic Church. I've worked with priests. I've worked with bishops, and I can tell you that this is what a priest told me one time. He said priests talk nothing about bishops, and bishops talk nothing about priests. That's all they talk about. So priests will just get around and talk about bishops. They know everything that the bishops are doing. And when bishops get together, they all talk about the priests. They cannot feign ignorance because
yeah. And also, Pell is an ambitious and successful political operator,
oh
right?
God. Yeah.
So if that was, there's no way that he could have not known about these things. That was actually something knowledge he would
And
have sought.
and this is how the
Yeah,
network of blackmail works in the Catholic Church is because priests, I know priests that nothing illegal, but that have gotten away with a lot. And I'm like, Father, like, how do you like do this or say this? They have information on their bishop, so they kind of get to
yeah,
do what they want.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
then a bishop will be like, will really put the iron heel on a priest because they know stuff
yeah,
about them.
yeah. And that's important. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because priests who might otherwise be honest, like they survive. They think, okay, well, I'm not blessing the altar boys. I can be a good priest in this parish, but my survival not being booted depends on my keeping my mouth shut.
You
Right?
survive in the Catholic Church by
Yeah,
keeping your head down and shutting up.
yeah, and
That
having stuff. It's like the Chinese Communist Party by having compromising material on other people.
yeah. I
Right?
I knew some good priests in the Catholic Church who I kind of like labeled as squeaky wheels and didn't do well. Don't do well at all. Barely tolerated on the edge of laicization
Yeah.
because
Um,
they speak out.
yeah. In Canada, they always get sent up north to the Indian reserves, which
Oh
is
my God, yeah.
yeah, which is it's pretty good news for the Indians actually, but
Sure,
it's
they get good
yeah,
priests.
yeah. So Rizdale, there's been three meetings at which Rizdale has been moved because he's molesting boys, and then finally, and Pell's been at all of them, and he said no one ever mentioned the reasons to me. They just lied to me why he's being moved. Finally, there's a fourth meeting. So after the third meeting, he goes to this Mortlake parish. Rizdale again molests tons of boys, right? So there's a fourth meeting in 1982 of the consultors, among whom Pell is one, right? And so at this fourth meeting, it said, okay, we gotta move Ridsdale again. We have to move him somewhere where he isn't going to have any contact with children, right? And Pell says, oh well, no one said anything about his being moved because he was a molester at that meeting either, right? Although it was said that it was said we're moving him to get him away from children, right? And the note taker, this Bishop Bryant, for that meeting, so the Bishop Finnegan, who took the minutes for that meeting, was survived. He said, if the bishop had given child sex abuse as the reason, it would not have been recorded in the minutes.
Exactly.
Right. And Pell says, because of Ridsdale's unusual number of appointments, the meeting would have discussed why he's being moved yet again, and the bishop would have given some reason. And so another guy said there's some problem with homosexuality. So it's been admitted, problem is homosexuality, move him away from children, right? Even that's, and Pell is supposed to have not realized that this was about the guy being a pedophile after he'd been moved many times. He was notorious. There are hundreds and hundreds of people he molested. So at this point, the Royal Commission actually says Cardinal Pell gave evidence that the bishop did not give the true reason for moving Ridsdale, namely his sexual activity with children, and the bishop lied, not giving the true reason to the consultants. So the commission says, we do not accept that Bishop Mulcairns lied to his consultants. Monsignor Fiscalini, Father Nolan, and Father Finnegan all knew of allegations or complaints about Ridsdale's conduct with children before the meeting. They knew why it was necessary to move Ridsdale from his parish and take him out of the parish and diocese to a position where access to children was restricted. It is inconceivable in these circumstances that Bishop Mulcairns deceived his consultors by not telling the true reason. There would be little utility in doing so. The secret is out in at least 2 parishes by 1978. Right? We are satisfied that Bishop Mulcairns told the consultors that it was necessary to move Ridsdale from the diocese and from parish work because of complaints that he'd sexually abused children. The contrary position is not tenable.
And that's why they think he's, like I showed in that headline, he might have abused 1,000 kids because they were moving him around a lot.
Yeah. He probably knew something on the grapevine about some of the guys or the bishop or something like that.
I wrote this. Yes. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's just absurd to say that Pell didn't cover up for Jared Ridsdale. Went along with his being moved to new places, to fresh fields and pastures new, where he could have abused more children.
Yeah.
I think he did it 4 times.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So these 4 meetings in which he was being moved, and Pell just lied the whole time. He said, "No, the bishop never mentioned anything." Right? He just lied.
Yeah.
Right. So Ridsdale finally is caught, gets put on trial, and you showed the picture of Pell appearing with Ridsdale.
I can show it again
at the trial. Yeah.
They, if the Catholics do canonize this guy, they should put this on the holy card. Yeah. Him and the pedo. This would be, the holy card picture. So
I mean, look at him. He looks shifty, doesn't he, Pell, in that picture?
Oh right? My God!
But Ridsdale doesn't look good. He looks quite nattily dressed, not sore in the least.
I have a quote. According to a separate news source, Pell once stated that Ridsdale had done a great damage to the church, but, quote, as a priest, he had done other good things.
He didn't do anything else except molest boys. That was his. He hardly had the time and energy for anything else. But so not only did Pell go there with Ridsdale accompanying him to the trial, right? Yeah. He said he would serve as a character reference for Ridsdale.
Yeah. Yeah. When asked
so that's
about
the Royal Commission.
Yeah. Yeah. When
and
asked,
a character reference is a reference to some good character, which Ridsdale most evidently did not possess.
Yeah. When asked about his presence at the court with Ridsdale, which angered many in Australia, Pell said he was a brother priest who made terrible mistakes, and it was simply a gesture in my part. Oh,
Well, look, I
Lord.
think I mentioned this in our previous interview some time ago. Pell was appearing there and being photographed to send a message, right? Which was that
Exactly.
if you follow me, I'll have your back, right?
Exactly.
No matter what you do, right? I'll support you if you're loyal to me. Joseph Shaw wrote quite a good article in the European Conservative recently about why priests kept and religious superiors kept moving on these criminals. And he said, look, this isn't what usually happens in the corporate world. You do hush it up, but what you do is if you're a manager, you pull the guy in and said, okay, here's all these accusations about you. I think the best thing would be for you just to leave quietly. So you just get rid of the guy. But you don't give him another job. You get rid of him. So there's equivalence in the Catholic Church. You sort of laicize them or something like that. But that wasn't done. And the reason that it was not done was because protecting these kinds of criminals was a lever of power for bishops.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, as when I was researching this podcast, I wrote this down. Of the 201 Catholic Church authorities surveyed by the Royal Commission, 46% reported having received at least one claim of child sex abuse. That's how bad it was in Australia.
Yeah.
Almost 50%. I mean, that's freaking insane. And Matt Fradd, that's why people were upset. That's why. Not
Yeah.
it's such BS. I get really annoyed at this, but in court,
But okay, that's why maybe some people were upset because he hypocritically defended Catholic teachings on this subjects, right? But
they were the
to say he's a saint is really, or was holy or is a martyr, is really disgusting.
Yeah. In court proceedings, it was revealed that Ridsdale had assaulted victims in toilet stalls, showers, and even in the confessional. He had allegedly carried a jar of Vaseline to his car, where he assaulted another boy. Another victim had to undergo anal surgery after he was sodomized by Ridsdale.
Okay, Ridsdale was a pervert, right, and a vile person. But I suppose, like, he probably got some. No doubt, he got a perverse pleasure and had some addiction to this evil behavior. But what did Pell and the others get out of protecting him?
Yeah. So
Right?
yeah,
They coldly sent him on to do all these things.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of Catholics point to the Melbourne response when they're when they're defending Pell. I just wanted to say this one thing real quick. In 1996, the year Pell was appointed Archbishop of Melbourne, he served there as auxiliary from 87 to 96. In an effort to address the growing problem of sexual abuse by priests, Archbishop Pell created the Melbourne Response. The Melbourne Response included the following: an independent commission to inquire into allegations of sexual abuse, free counseling and professional support services for the victims, and the establishment of a compensation panel, which gives the Archdiocese recommendations on making payments to victims. Payments were initially capped at $50,000 and have since been raised to $75,000 for being sodomized by a priest. For those victims who did not want to participate in the Archdiocese compensation plan, the Melbourne response included this admonition. Let me read it. Complainants remain free to use the normal court processes if they do not wish to avail themselves of the compensation panel process. In that event, they should expect that the proceedings will continue to be strenuously defended. Any claimant coming before the panel will be informed of their right to refuse the ex gratia payment being offered and to pursue their claims in the civil courts. They will also be informed that the Archbishop and the Archdiocese will continue to defend claims in the courts on all bases. According to an investigation of the Melbourne response by a Royal Commission, even though Cardinal Pell testified that I had no reason to doubt, that's a quote, the validity of a particular victim's abuse claim. The victim received a letter from the Archdiocese stating that compensation was, quote, a realistic alternative to litigation that will otherwise be strenuously defended. So, real quick, and then John, I want to hear from you. Is it? I'll break this down for Matt Fradd listeners. So, the Melbourne response set forth a set payment that would be given to victims. Now, if you didn't agree with that, you would have to take that to a court, a criminal or a civil court. And even if the diocese and the archdiocese knew that your claim was legitimate, they would defend it.
Yeah, yeah, and that happened in a later case in Sydney that I'd like to talk about, the John Ellis case. But yeah, so the Melbourne response, it was just a damage control exercise.
It was a shakedown.
Well, no doubt the cap is calculated was done on the basis of consultations with the insurers. So what happens is if you complain and they figure, okay, you might get somewhere in the courts, right? We'll offer you an ex gratia payment, a payment that admits no responsibility on the part of anyone, right? And it's capped. The greatest amount was $50,000. You could be offered less, and victims were, right? So there's no relation to the actual damages inflicted on the victim or the victim's needs as a result of the abuse. There's no admission of responsibility. The alleged independent commissioners were linked to the church. If you took the money, right? Here's a quote from from one of the response. The payment is accepted in full and final settlement of the applicant's claims in respect of the abuse. Consider the matters aforesaid. The applicant hereby releases and forever discharges the Archbishop, any person who in the past has been the Archbishop of the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne, any person who may in the future be the Archbishop of the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne, the Roman Catholic, and so on, from anyone remotely connected to the Church in Melbourne, from all actions, claims, demands, causes of action, or costs, howsoever arising, or of whatsoever nature arising out of, connected with, or in relation to the abuse. Right. So there's no commitment made in this response to informing the police if the complainant had was judged to have a valid case about having criminally abused. There's no commitment to doing anything about the abuser, removing them from their job.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no commitment to any kind of actually canon law, which no one obeys any longer, actually requires it. It says that clerics who commit these crimes are supposed to be tried. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no commitment, which never ever happened. There's no commitment to any canonical case.
Right.
All it was a means for silencing victims by paying them off a certain sum of money.
Right. And as I wrote here, if you signed off on one of these payments, you had to sign a non-disclosure
Yeah.
I put confidentiality agreement here. The application for confirmation form. This is what the Royal Commission found. The application for compensation form is ambiguous. It could be read as imposing broad undertakings of confidentiality upon its victims. It was amended.
And of course, that means that you couldn't not even tell the police or tell anyone else that, okay, Father O'Malley is an abuser because he abused me.
Yeah, it was amended in 2002, but in addition, those who agree to receive confirmation under the terms of the Melbourne response must waive their rights to future litigation against the Archdiocese.
Yeah. So this is just Pell's way of dealing with the problem by paying off victims what he considers to be an affordable sum of money, and thereby shutting them up.
Yeah.
Knowing that they're pretty desperate.
Yeah.
They can't afford to sneeze at $50,000. They can't afford to litigate things against the archdiocese. The police at that time might not be too cooperative if they went to them, and so on and so forth. So I was going to say the Melbourne response was another reason I was going to give for Pell not being a saint. Right? It was a thoroughly corrupt approach.
Exactly. One of the things that I read about Pell, in terms of here we go. One of the things I read about Pell in terms of the victim's response to him was his indifference, and this is a quote, lack of empathy. So
sociopathic lack of empathy.
Right. So I wanted to play this clip.
I couldn't say that I ever knew that everyone knew. I knew a number of people did. I didn't know whether it was common knowledge or whether it wasn't. It's a sad story, and it wasn't of much interest to me.
What wasn't of much interest to you, Cardinal?
The suffering, of course, was real, and I very much regret that, but I had no reason to turn my mind to the extent of the evils that Ridsdale had perpetrated.
Can you think of a reason why you might want to turn your mind to those evils?
You could hear people gasp in the audience.
Yeah.
So it kind of doesn't surprise me that somebody like Matt Fradd is touched by, Cardinal Pell's reminiscence of, different football teams and not watching sports one night when, this is the man that couldn't be concerned about priests who were directly under his supervision, who were molesting boys. There's the same, I see this same indifference and lack of empathy. Not so much, the Catholic laity, I've seen a lot of compassion, but along the spokespeople and the mouthpieces for the church, you see that lack of empathy. And I hate to say I see it in Matt Fradd too.
Yeah. Cardinal Pell had a secretary, Michael Casey, who he got to do some of his dirty work, and I think got to take the fall for him on some occasion. I remember seeing Michael Casey. You could see he wasn't empathetic, but you could see he was haunted, right? You could see he was haunted by what he did. But so that's, I guess, the two reasons: Pell covering up for Ridsdale, as he moved around to abuse hundreds of boys. One reason why he's not a saint. Melbourne response, totally corrupt. Second reason why he's not a saint. I wanted to cite a third one, which was the case of John Ellis.
Oh.
So Mel was moved from Melbourne to Sydney, one of the biggest cities in Australia, to the other one, right? Two big Catholic cities, where he became the archdiocese, and he set up a process for victims of sexual abuse called Toward Healing, where there is a towards healing process there. So there's a man there called John Ellis. He was sexually assaulted by Father Aidan Duggan from 1974 to 1979 in Sydney. So he's deeply traumatized by this physically as well as mentally. So 2002, Pell's the Archbishop. Ellis goes to the archdiocese to start this process, right? And they're very convinced you're supposed to give a pastoral response, help out the person, and it's the same as the same as the same kind of idea as the Melbourne response, right? So Ellis wanted what Ellis laid out what he wanted. He said he wants Father Duggan not to be in active ministry. He wants an acknowledgement of the wrong done to him. Father Duggan will be confronted with the complaint and acknowledge the wrong done. Then he's just stalled. Nothing happens, right? But he then goes on in, sort of perseveres. Duggan is in a nursing home. He's losing his mind at this point, but he talks to another guy from the Archdiocese, Monsignor Rayner. So this priest Rayner accepts that Duggan did molest Ellis. Okay, and he tells Pell this, right? Pell reads the complaint. Okay, Pell reads the complaint, is told that it's valid, right? Ellis's request, in addition to the sort of the acknowledgement, he says, okay, well, the payment is capped at $50,000. But my wife has suffered a great deal from this abuse as well as myself, so I want $100,000.
Good for him.
Okay, yeah,
good.
So Pell says no. Okay, we're not going to do that. So Ellis, who's by then a lawyer, takes the church to court, right? So Pell instructs the lawyers, his own lawyers, to defend the case vigorously, right? He instructs them to dispute Ellis's abuse, although he's already accepted that it actually happened. Wow. So then Ellis goes through a very painful process of cross-examination, where they, for over 3 days, casting doubt on the truth of his abuse. And so Pell, when he gets to the Royal Commission, the lawyers of the Archdiocese accepted that it was not necessary to cross-examine Mr. Ellis whether he was abused, especially because the basis of the church's defense is that, okay, Ellis can't, there's no sort of proper body that Ellis can sue. Right. He could have sued the old Archbishop from 1974 to 79, but right. There's no one he can sue now. So there's no need for the reality of the abuse to be disputed. Pell ordered that it be disputed to break down Ellis, right? And it caused great psychological damage. Okay. Then some more witnesses come forward. They speak to Pell's lawyers, saying, "Okay, yeah, Duggan was a sexual abuser. And he was actually seen kissing Ellis." Okay, so the lawyers grasp. Okay, well, yeah, it looks there's much better evidence, there's much better evidence now for the abuse. But the lawyers did not get an affidavit from these guys, and they did not bring her evidence to the attention of either the court or Mr. Ellis. Continue to dispute that he'd been abused. Okay. Ellis makes an offer to mediate in 2006. Archdiocese continues to deny the abuse abused. Finally, the Court of Appeal upholds the church's case, not because he was never abused, but because he says there's no one at the present moment who is liable for the abuse. And they say, okay, Mr. Ellis, you now have to pay $500,000 in legal costs to the Archdiocese of Sydney, right? Wow. So you have to pay for all the lawyers who were dishonestly denying that you'd ever been sexually abused. So Ellis kind of collapses. Collapses. There's some discussion about whether they can just sort of find out what Ellis's finances are and say you can just pay what you can afford or something like that. In the Royal Commission, okay, Pell says, I was quite clear that if an offence had been admitted by the Archdiocese, we could not deny that it took place. When it was put to Cardinal Pell that the effect of disputing the fact of Mr. Ellis's abuse was the same as denying that the abuse occurred, Cardinal Pell replied, "I would not draw that conclusion." Finally, Pell's lawyers tell him, look, you might not get very good publicity about this if you try to get the $500,000 to the guys in costs. Okay?
Yeah.
The Archdiocese, so one of Pell's minions, Danny Casey, says, we can forego the costs of the plaintiff would undertake not to approach the press about this matter in the future. Okay. Then the Archdiocese meet the lawyers, and it says, His Eminence Cardinal Pell wants to avoid any negative publicity associated with causing Ellis to go bankrupt or causing him to experience an exacerbation of his psychiatric condition. But balanced against this, we do not want the lawyers to think the church will simply roll over on its cost every time the plaintiff loses the case. So finally, 3 years later, Pell says, "Okay, well, look, we won't ask for $500,000 of legal fees." And Ellis is a complete wreck by this point, right? Even more of a complete wreck than he was. Right? So you see Pell's lying and bullying tactics all through this, right?
Yeah.
He knows the abuse occurred, instructs them that the lawyers to dispute it, to break down the victim, even though it's not necessary for the legal case.
Wow.
And in the end, there's so much embarrassment that what they do is Pell meets him and he says, sorry, it was all a bit unfortunate. And the Archdiocese pays about $470,000 towards reconstructing Ellis's house.
Oh, wow.
Which had been damaged in a storm.
Wow.
Right. So obviously they thought, okay, well, we can't pay anything that admits our culpability, but
right.
We'll rebuild his house.
Right. But Cardinal Pell is a saint. Don't forget that.
Well,
don't
Cardinal
forget.
Pell gave evidence that in relation to Mr. Ellis's case, in a legal sense, we always acted honestly, but from a Christian point of view, leaving aside the legal dimension, I don't think we did fairly.
Duh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, duh.
Right?
Gee, man.
So the Royal Commission says, we agree with Cardinal Pell's evidence that which we take to be the Archdiocese of trustees and he is Archbishop, did not act fairly from a Christian point of view in the conduct of the litigation against Mr. Ellis. Right? So we have Pell himself saying in this absolutely disgusting case that, I didn't act right, I didn't act properly from a Christian point of view.
Hold on, John.
Yeah.
I want to share.
Interesting. I haven't seen this one, so I can't actually comment on it.
Okay. Well, John, I just wanted to end. I know you've been generous with your time. I wanted to end with these two articles. They're recent. They're actually this month. So as the Catholic Church finds a new legal defense against child sex abuse charges, discussed with the late Cardinal George Pell's glorification, has now led some of his own victims to come forward and detail their abuse at his hands. So in response to people like Matt Fradd, who are calling for Pell's canonization, some victims are coming forward. This article, George Pell abused two boys in Ballarat compensation scheme, decides, and this is from the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Two men were compensated after the National Redress Scheme accepted they were abused as boys by the late Cardinal George Pell in Ballarat in the 1970s. One man who the scheme decided was groped by Pell was compensated just 5 weeks before the Cardinal's death. So people can read this if they like. I actually believe these survivors. I believed the two survivors, well, the one survivor in the other case, the sacristy case. One had died of a drug overdose. So I don't see how Catholics can literally try to canonize this man. I wrote a note here. Only in the Roman Catholic Church could someone like Matt Fradd make a very good living and say the things that he is saying about the canonization of not only a suspected pedophile, but somebody that's been clearly proved to have covered up pedophilia. I don't understand it. I don't think it would I don't think it would be acceptable except in the Catholic Church, because there's this odd sort of Stockholm syndrome in Catholicism where people try to constantly cover up for really awful instances of abuse. And it's not. I had a victim, or a survivor. I'll call him a survivor. I had a survivor say something to me once, and I didn't know how to take it, but it gets more and more true. He said one of the big problems in the pre-sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church was the laity. You
Yeah,
know,
they covered for the abusers.
oh my God. I mean,
Well, to be fair, to be fair to the Australians, if you look at Ridsdale, right, people are going and complaining, say do something about it, like that boy in Pell in the swimming pool. Just if I may say something on the martyrdom, right? So literally, to be martyred, you have to die for the faith. Well, you say by extension, was Pell tried and sent to jail on dubious evidence? Dubious evidence. Uh, because he was a martyr for the faith, or because he spoke out for the faith? I don't think so. I mean, there's other bishops, other Australian bishops who've also made made statements defending the faith who weren't put on trial. His trial, okay, there are several aspects to it. One is that, of course, the state of Victoria Police, have been complicit in covering up abuse by the Catholic Church, and by many other people as well, right? So it was in their interests to sort of distract from their own crimes by putting Pell on trial, right? There's also, of course, there's great revulsion at his protecting of pedophiles like Ridsdale. It was thought, well, look, like this guy's got it coming to him, and we got to make sure that he pays for it in some way. Pell was involved in the Vatican, sort of allegedly by Bergoglio, to clean out the Vatican's finances, right? The last thing that in fact Bergoglio would ever want to happen. But Pell got involved and embroiled in sort of the finances of the Vatican. There's a case to be made that some of his enemies in the Vatican sweetened the deal, sort of made the prosecution of Pell a bit more attractive by paying off by sending money to some of the police and prosecutors. I don't know if that's true, but like none of these things make him a saint, right?
no.
Look at Carmen Galante, right? He was the head of the Bonanno family, one of the New York Five crime families. He was assassinated by the Mafia Commission. Okay, so you can say he was murdered, right? But that doesn't make him a saint. He got, so maybe Pell was framed by some of his other corrupt enemies in the church. That's not evidence for sanctity.
No.
Right? I think for reasons that I don't want to go into, there is a possibility that he may, God willing, have repented before his death. But of course, if he hadn't been sent to jail, that would never have happened.
No.
Right? That was his chance for redemption, being sent to jail. And please God, he took it before he died. Right?
Yeah.
But okay, repentance doesn't mean that he didn't commit appalling crimes before he died. He did. And I don't know anything about Matt Fradd. Look, these guys, they're in it for the money, right? And if you send a message that says, okay, these guys this cardinal was really a hero of the faith. He wasn't a dubious, thuggish, bog-trotting um, criminal political operator. Right?
Exactly.
People like that better.
They do.
And especially with the internet, you can create a whole mental environment for people to live in which they're happier, and then you'll have more than 600,000 subscribers, and you'll make a lot of money.
I see Catholics, and this is the milieu that these people circulate in. I see Catholics in not just just regular normal lay Catholics, but I see some Catholic influencers online saying that the sex abuse crisis wasn't as bad as it was made to be. It was a witch hunt against the Catholic Church because, like Matt Fradd said, the Catholic Church supposedly stands up on these social moral issues, and that it's
like the American Catholic bishops denounced Joe Biden for his support of abortion, right?
exactly
Remember how they vehemently opposed his all his pro-abortion policies?
exactly
Yeah.
exactly. But I think it makes people feel good about being Catholic. That they're like, oh, look at this man. He was persecuted. He was put in jail because he was such a good man, and it makes them feel good. And they don't look any deeper than that. I mean, all they would have to do is Google something,
Yeah.
and then they could actually find out more of the truth. But there's a bad kind of antipathy towards survivors by a lot of Catholics, where they don't believe them, and they think that they're just out for the money, or they hate the church, and they're looking out for revenge. And
By trying to actually put a stop to, it's like if you call the police, you see someone breaking into someone's breaking your house, and you call the police. Are you like are you damaging society? Right?
apparently,
By actually trying, yeah, boy.
yeah, apparently you are. I don't know. I don't know. I wanted to shed some light and truth on this matter, because there are people that will see somebody like Matt Fradd, who says, well, we should canonize Pell, and they believe it. But then you've also got people like Bishop Barron, Archbishop Corleone, saying what a good and holy man this person was. And I don't know. I
Well,
don't
those are guys which are obviously very dubious characters.
I
And
don't
here's another fact about Pell. So there's a gay parish in Sydney, in Newtown, right? So it has usually all the rainbow banners, all the
Is this
sort of
is it Catholic?
in yeah, Catholic parish in Sydney. There's the
Wow.
gay parish,
Wow.
right? Uh, in Newtown, where they had all the rainbow banners, and
Yeah.
everyone met up and hooked up and sort of went off down to the local establishments
Yeah.
afterwards. And I know Pell was asked several times, "Why don't you close it down?" And he never did, and he never gave a convincing answer, right?
Yeah.
So why didn't he close it down? This parish where people are being actually led into very self-destructive behaviors.
Because that parish had dirt on him.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
We have the same situation here in
Yeah.
San Francisco, where, well, I wish it was just one. It's several Catholic parishes that are just out and about gay affirmative. And I had a conversation with Archbishop Corleone. I said, you would do better by closing them, because they're doing more harm than good. And of course he doesn't
No.
do that at all, you know. So
And they entered, but also Pell wanted promotion. He wanted his big job in the Vatican, which eventually he got, right? I mean, it didn't do him much good in the end. I mean, he ended up in jail, and but I mean, of course, even if he was a resourceful and bullying individual, he probably could have coped with people who had dirt on him
Yeah.
I mean, he did probably, right? But uh, if he wanted to, but he didn't want to because he'd go shutting around gay parishes. Like the whole network up to the Curia
Yeah.
turns against you.
Yeah. I think to be picked, and then I'll let you go because I've kept you too long. I think to be picked out for the hierarchy in the Catholic Church when you're a priest or even a seminarian, and then to rise within the ranks, it requires a certain personality. And I go back to the victims in Australia that I watched. I watched their interviews and they talked about that indifference and that lack of empathy. That's a quote that they've found in Cardinal Pell. And I have to say, as a survivor myself, and I've spoken with other bishops, I have noticed that same indifference as well. It's quite pathological. You you don't encounter people like that very often unless they're sociopaths, because you can be talking about, I mean, as a survivor, you can be talking about what most people would consider very heartbreaking details about child abuse, and they will sit there poker faced.
Yeah. Well, that's one of their strengths, right? Or from their own selfish point of view. Because most people, as you say, in day to life, you don't encounter people like that. The average sort of decent Catholic doesn't encounter people like that. They don't have any experience of them. I never really had much experience
Unless you work in
until I worked
an
in the Catholic Church, right?
or an insane
So
asylum.
you just can't. Yeah, you can't. I tried telling people like these guys are serious criminals, right? They have the mentality of criminals. They lie without any difficulty or shame,
God, yeah.
right? They have no empathy at all. In fact, they hate people because they're victims, and they think they deserve to suffer because they're victims, right? And they enjoy making them suffer.
Yeah.
They're serious criminals.
Yeah. And that's why I played that short little quote, that little clip of Pell talking about, well, I wasn't particularly concerned about the victims, and people gasped. And and I would argue he had that kind of psychology going on in his brain when he was a young priest. And those are the kind of people who rise within the ranks of the church. Those are exactly those sorts of people. And
well, there's also the people who are good at, who pretend to be empathetic while enjoying your suffering. But
oh God, I have met them. But
yeah,
and
yeah,
also one, I keep saying one last thing. One last thing. This is, I've had several conversations with Gene Gamulka, and he specializes in the seminary process in the Catholic Church. And I think this sort of self-selection begins in the seminary, where these sort of psychotic people or sociopathic people are found in the seminary process.
yeah,
And those
yeah.
are the ones that are funneled into chanceries and into working for the archbishops and the cardinals, and they rise up the ranks. A whistleblower priest, forget it. You're never gonna go anywhere. Like you said, you'll end up in the North Pole.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, I thanks. Well, like thanks for having me on and listening to what I have to say. I think it's very useful to get this out. It's sort of I share your disgust at the idea that Pell was a saint of some kind. I mean, you can say he was a sinner, and maybe he had a couple of redeeming qualities,
Yeah.
but not very many. But it's saying he's a saint. It's insane.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not Catholic anymore, and I don't subscribe to the Catholic canonization process. I don't believe Pope John Paul was a saint just for his involvement in the
No, of
McCarrick
course he wasn't a
and
saint. Yeah.
the Legionnaires of Christ and all that mess. But I almost kind of hope, canonize Pell. And it'll maybe for some people in the world who are still on the fence, it'll show what the Catholic Church is about. Canonize a pedophile. Canonize a pedophile enabler. Go ahead.
Well, it's been It's been done. It's been done already.
Oh man, that made you cry. I'm sorry. You're
Sorry.
right.
Yeah.
It's been done already. Wow, I didn't realize that.
Well, no, I'm sure.
Oh,
I don't know what a pedophile. I was just saying it. Probably. I just think someone it must have been done. I'm sure it's done under JP2 or, well,
yeah,
like the alleged Saint Paul the Sixth, right?
yeah. That's
He was a
scary.
monster, a saint.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary. Okay. Well, thank you, John. Let me hit
Okay. Well, thanks, Joseph. God bless.